An update on Chi-Town basketball. According to our Adrian Wojnarowski, the Bulls are hiring Denver general manager Arturas Karnisovas. He will become Chicago's EVP of basketball operations. Karnisovas, 48, will replace John Paxson, who had been running the Bulls basketball operations since 2003 and is expected to move into an advisory role. In an article for The Undefeated, Mark Spears wrote about some league executives who are frustrated with the Bulls' lack of diversity within their hiring process. There are currently 8 minority GMs in the NBA, 6 of whom are African American. Stephen A., you're up first. Does the NBA have a minority hiring problem?
Well, I think they do. I think they do personally, because I'm not just looking at the GM position. The fact of the matter is that when you are the Chicago Bulls and you have a host of candidates for the job, and not one of them are an African American candidate in a league that's more than 75% black, I think that's a red flag. That's number one. Number two, it also resonates with me. Max, you can appreciate this position. One of the candidates was Brian Colangelo. We know what happened. I like Brian, but we know what happened with him in Philly. The fact that he's on a list before a black candidate speaks to a culture that exists in the NBA, at least to some degree, where black folks are on the outside looking in, unfortunately. And I'm certainly not going to blame the league office for that. The deputy commissioner is a black man, and Mark Tatum, for crying out loud. But I'm certainly not going to look at the league for that. I'm going to look at individual teams and the level of sensitivity, for lack of a better word, that's being brought to the equation. That's number two. Number three, analytics, I think, plays a role in all of this, because anybody, and I don't know this particular individual's background, to be quite honest with you, I haven't paid much attention to it, but what I would tell you is that what we've been seeing in recent memory is a slew of individuals associated with analytics that are getting hired. And it's rare, if ever, that you see a black man in the mix in regards to all of that. So you've got a whole bunch of guys that are great with numbers. They're numbers crunchers. They analyze things from that perspective. That is a language owners understand, because owners, by virtue of knowing numbers and knowing business, are incredibly receptive to these individuals. They hire them, and these individuals hire folks that they're comfortable with, that they know, and very rare are they black men. That's number three. And number four, and last but not least, Max Kellerman, I'm going to point this out. Again, I'm going to dig into it a little bit deeper before, I go any further than what I'm about to go. I'll stop by saying it raises my eyebrow. It raises a red flag. Mark Spears, who does a great job for us, should have been speaking on this issue as well. But I will say this. We've talked on many occasions about player empowerment. The Chris Pauls, the LeBron James, the Steph Currys, and others. We're talking about a league that's over 75 to 80% black. Where are the players speaking on these issues on behalf of black men who want to coach and want to be executives in this league? It would be nice if their social consciousness, if their political consciousness basically came back to thinking about black men who aspire to be in decision-making and decision-influential positions, since these players have so much influence themselves, that they would step back and look out for those that are trying to come up in the profession, but not on the playing court, in the coach's box, in the executive box. It would really be nice to hear modern-day players speak on that issue, especially since they're so powerful.
It's a simple issue on the surface, and when you dig a little deeper, there's a lot more to it. On the surface, there just aren't enough African-American executives in a league, as you mentioned, that's 3/4 African-American. You would think that they would cull from the ranks of those with experience for executive positions. That's normally what happens, what we see in various sports. Except when it comes to African-American hires. And part of what's damning, I think, is you see a list of African-American GMs in the NBA, and you see like 8 names. You're like, oh, look at that, 8 names. Why is that okay? There are 30 teams. If 8 seems like a lot, that's really an indictment of where we are. And look, some of this is, the more so it's not complex from that point of view. There aren't enough. Does the NBA have a minority hiring problem? Clearly. Just look at the numbers. Then the question is why? What does this represent within the NBA and outside the NBA? I mean, there's structural inequality that goes back centuries in this country that still hasn't been fully addressed, obviously, access to education and stuff like that. So, Stephen A., that may speak to your point about analytics. I mean, there's no reason that there's some kind of racial divide, genetically in terms of who's interested in math and things like that and who's good at it. So clearly that's an issue of opportunity and maybe cultural emphasis based on opportunity and stuff like that. And maybe that has to be addressed. I think also when you look at the Rooney Rule in the NFL, you see, what's the real point in making sure that you at least have some so-called minority candidates sit in front of ownership and those in charge of hiring decisions? What's the point of that, really? Because is it simply the optics that we see that there are African Americans as well as European Americans in positions of power? I mean, even if the answer to that is yes, there's value there, that as a society, for lack of a better word, we can look and see, oh, okay, there really is equal access to opportunity, or at least an attempt for it. And so when you see a list of 8 candidates who are being looked at by an organization that has an opening at the highest executive level, and none of them are African American in a league that is 75% African American, the answer to does it have a minority hiring problem? It speaks, it answers itself. Right. It's obvious. It's apparent. Of course there is.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.